All right, we're back at last. Welcome to the Nearbound Podcast. Isaac, we just keep leveling up. Last week we had Harry Mack, which, obviously I was fangirling,
Hard.
pretty dang hard. But we got increasingly more special and more special people. You brought this one to life, though, so I want to let you at least set up the intro, and then I'll
okay.
kick off.
First, I had to point out, if those of you who are watching this on video, it's a very strange mix. I have this soccer jersey on that came from Audience Plus. It's got Reveal and Audience Plus. And then Jared is like Witness Protection Program outfit today. And Anthony Kennada, who is a founder and CEO of Audience Plus, joining us. He looks so dapper. He's got a jacket on. You're usually a t-shirt guy, Anthony. You're in the studio. It's like a news broadcast over there. You're putting us to shame.
Look, I didn't know I was backing up Harry Mack. I would have put a tux on here, anything to really keep the conversation engaged like that. So no, I appreciate it.
Well, I got to imagine, Jared, I know you have something you want to kick it off with, but I've wondered this, Anthony, when you are in the sort of media business, enabling people to do media and your whole thesis about owned media, which we'll get into, do you feel this like ridiculous amount of pressure to have amazing production quality every time you do anything?
Not as much. I mean, what's interesting is what we wanted to do was to get to like a good enough amount of production quality that is scalable. And so, it's a much longer story. I won't derail us, but basically we built an in-house studio for like 10K. What you're seeing right now is like not that expensive, but we configured it and now we can produce an unlimited amount of content at that level. So there's definitely better than this, but we thought for the cost, like this was like a good enough balance. And so slightly elevated perhaps because of what we do and kind of the mission that we're on, but certainly don't think you need to like break the bank either to like get pretty good production.
Next swag item after the jersey, you got to send me the Audience Plus sport coat so that I can level up too.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
We've been on that kick. We got the Nearbound Nikes. Isaac and I were rocking those in New Orleans last week, which was pretty cool. They were kind of the talk of the town. But Anthony, thanks so much for joining us. Big fan of your work. For the folks that don't follow Anthony and what he's doing right now, I think it speaks to such an incredible macro shift in the world. And a lot of what I've been obsessed with over the past few years has been, I'd say, tangentially related to some of Anthony's messaging. So, Anthony, I was at Drift and was a student of David Cancel and Dave Gerhardt, and I was geeking out there as much as I possibly could. I was there as a participant, but also there to learn. And the thing that I would describe and the thing I wanted to kick off this section with is this quote that I heard, and I can't even remember where I heard it, but I want your take on this. It's easier to turn attention into capital than it is to turn capital into attention. And I feel like that's what we're all feeling right now, whether it's complaining about the demand gen funnel and blah, 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 but we're overwhelmed. And let's kick it off there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen the other side of it. I've seen the trying to turn capital into attention. And I don't want to start with a hot take right out of the gates, but a lot of companies that I'd worked for since Gainsight were product-led businesses where a lot of the way we acquired those customers were very transactional. There wasn't a relationship at all in terms of how that deal got done. And then over time, they actually would run up their usage and over their spend as well. And at both of those companies, part of what I tried to do was just get them on the phone. And I couldn't. Like, they would not return our emails. They would not return our calls. Some of them were on monthly contracts. And I'm talking, these were 6-figure, potentially, I think a couple were even 7-figure deals with us. So we had the capital, but we couldn't earn the right to actually have the attention because there was no relationship at all. We were a vendor. We were a software provider to them. And I think what's really interesting about both of our kind of trends that we're kind of championing is it's all about the relationship, in fact. And if you can build that relationship, capture the attention, serve each other, whether it's through content or just kind of building bridges and relational equity between you two, that's a much more sustainable way to actually convert into revenue, counterculturally, right? Or maybe in a non-obvious way where doing the right thing actually turns into better business. So it's really interesting. I think that I've never heard that quote before, but I've seen it play out to be true. And I think we're both of our companies are helping champion that kind of relational acquisition motion as a much more sustainable way to build a business.
You know, it's funny, you're what you talk about all the time, you know, media, you talk about owned media. And I think a lot of times, a lot of marketers in particular, when they hear media, they think a lot about, at least older school, you think about like earned media, and you think about these big moments where suddenly you finally get the coverage. And of course, this has changed and this has shifted quite a bit now, but you still have the, like, if only we could go on the Joe Rogan show or whatever, this idea that like, if you have a big moment, and I think what's so interesting of like the way you talk about media and the way that this, you know, intersects with Nearbound, where you're really living in market and surrounding your customers, not just with your own content, but with voices that they already trust through which this content is being talked about. It's about building ongoing conversations rather than just like a moment. And I had this experience myself with a previous company. It was like an alternative to college, a boot camp for people that wanted to go into tech. And, you know, we bootstrapped and we built everything organically, like hundreds, thousands of blog posts over, you know, a couple of years, hundreds of podcast episodes, books, tons of social media, just like slowly building these conversations. And we suddenly got a national media attention. And when that happened, it had a nice spike, but it more had this long residual. Contrast to some of my competitors who raised VC from big name venture capitalists and got like New York Times coverage right out the gate. And I remember being like really jealous at first. I mean, like maybe I should have gone that route. And every time they got a moment, but there was nothing to do with that moment except go to their website and sign up. By the time we got attention, we got it because of 2 years of building an ongoing conversation. When the moment came, the attention that it got, people went and they realized, it's like they opened a door and were like, oh, there's a bunch of people in here having a conversation, and they've been having it for a while. And there was something to participate in. It wasn't just a product to buy or a program to sign up for. And so I think, like, I would love for you to talk about, it's like in the attention economy, people think about that lightning strike, getting the attention, but like, what are you going to do with it? You're not just going to point people to a product. You're asking them to enter in, and it has to be a conversation that's already going between a lot of people, not just your company.
Totally. In fact, that's how we started our company, Audience Plus. We're very young in the scheme of things, but just over a year ago, we started the conversation. We started talking about owned media, started talking about the headwinds in digital marketing specifically, and didn't have a product to sell yet. And so we were sitting on a seed round, right, that we had raised at that point about 7 months before, still didn't announce it. And we waited until our product was at a point of maturity that we could launch a request a demo page, so that when we, and again, I'll build on this, but even at that point, so when we sent traffic through a big kind of larger than life moment, that people can actually take a next step, but the conversation would have already been started and they would have the context and they would have sort of that framing. But what's interesting is even the request a demo CTA, it's very kind of commercially oriented. We're suggesting that people wanted to buy a product. And so what happens to the people on the other end of that campaign that don't have the budget in this economic climate today to actually pull the trigger on the platform, or they're not running an evaluation, or they're not, equipped in their current kind of job function, but they care about the topic. They are engaged with the content. They join the events, they belong, they feel seen. There's this like emotive relationship there. And that's what I think is really part of what this next generation of marketing looks like. And the person that actually I'm learning a lot from on this is John Miller, co-founder of Marketo, who wrote the playbook for the first generation of digital marketing.
I wouldn't put you and John Miller in the same camp. So this is
an
interesting
why not,
one.
Jared? Why not?
Oh, totally.
Just John and Anthony's style are very different. Just John's just like tactical, execute, like just that. And then I view as not that you haven't, because of course you have. Unpack that one for me a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I see. So I'll get back to the John thing, or I'll get back to the story. Sure. But I see him as like a revenue marketer with a bent towards content. Effectively, that's the Marketo story, right? Definitive guides, all these types of things. I'm more of a brand marketer with a bent towards revenue, but like we meet in the middle on content. And I think that's kind of the overlap between us. But much, respect and admiration for kind of what he's built, because that's the playbook I had been executing in many ways, like early in my marketing career. But he just released an article couple weeks ago, I believe, for the OpenView blog called "The Marketing Playbook That I Helped Create Doesn't Work Anymore."
Yes.
And first of all, I think it takes a lot of self-awareness and, in fact, even courage to probably write something like that. But what he was saying there is the same thing you're talking about, Isaac. He said that we spent the last 2 decades trying to capture the 5% of our market who is in market today to buy software at the expense of the 95%. The people who, again, care about the topic, they're within our audience. They want to be resourced and connect with others and feel like they belong to something. And we're not giving them anywhere to go. We're not giving them any sort of, resource beyond the blips that we're kind of manufacturing from an earned perspective or that we're buying from a paid perspective. And I think that's what really is interesting about owned media, Nearbound, these sort of this new chapter for this industry is we're giving them a place to belong. And again, go back to the earlier conversation, that turns into revenue and it turns into revenue in a sustainable way. And dare I say it, in an efficient way compared to the New York Times ad placement that venture capital, that startup ended up buying likely. This is a very sustainable way to build relationship and ultimately to monetize those relationships into revenue.
I think what you touch on there is very important, because whenever we're going through such a tectonic shift in go-to-market and B2B and SaaS or tech, we tend to look at ourselves and our tactics and the things that we're doing. Isaac's described this phenomena as like everyone right now is problem aware but solution wary. And I love that framing, because what it should call all of us to do is to understand what's the actual fundamental change in human behavior. It's that, we were persuaded by things like advertising for some time. And the way that we used to buy was like trying to figure something out through maybe some content and how-to guide or what have you. But those things aren't working as much anymore. So what are we doing instead? Well, we're recognizing that I've said that trust comes from people, from helping people reach their promised land. But the problem is that we only trust people who've already been to the places we want to go. So if you're building a marketing organization or a partner program or a company or whatever those things are, let me ask you a question, Anthony. How many people who've worked under you have been a CMO before if you're selling to CMOs? The answer is none of them.
Yeah.
Right. So how are you supposed to trust those people? I think that's where the two things come together. Nearbound and owned media. We're creating a space and a conversation for people to go, look, these people are going somewhere or they're already ahead. And that's where I'm trying to get to. And wait, this company or these subset of people, they're the ones helping me get there. And if that's the objective, man, I feel so happy about that. I'm like, I'm going to go help people get where they're trying to go. Sometimes I don't know what the heck I'm doing. So let me go find the people that have. That seems to me to be just a fundamental truth that no one could argue with me about. I'd love your take on that in terms of like, what is our remit then in this Nearbound and owned media era? And how do we help people get there?
Yeah, first of all, I deeply believe with how you framed that. It's interesting because I think about the people that I follow online. Who am I learning from as a CMO? Well, right now as a CEO, I'm learning from other CEOs because that's my gap to close. Is I built marketing teams, but I've never started a company before, and so that's kind of where I'm learning from. So imagine taking company building advice from someone who's never founded a company before, or following that voice on YouTube or Twitter or whatever,
like a VC, like an entry level, VC MBA, partner that's telling you how to build your company, and they're 4 years out of their MBA program.
Totally. No, that's exactly it. Now the part of it that again can get a little messy is like what I'm believing for the future of like the B2B creator thing is like we get more of those voices into the conversation. And it's not to say the folks that haven't done it before, but have a big followership, that their voice doesn't matter by any means. But there's something to be said about the experience and the credibility and the wisdom from folks that have gone before us who might have a lot to say on the topic, but they just don't have this light and that mic and that followership maybe that someone else might. So I'm really interested and curious about how can we, rather than finding just creators who have a lot of big followerships and a big megaphone, how can we find the experts and help support them to create more and to pay it forward and to contribute to the conversations that are being had online. Because I think that's going to make that's how we go from this, I think, being pre-chasm to post-chasm. At least one component of it that I think is going to be really important.
Getting that. I think I heard, I don't remember who, I think maybe Chris Lockhead on a previous episode, we were talking about category design. He's like, the right words from the right mouths. And that the right mouth, like who are the right mouth? Who are the right people for this message? We often think as marketers, like, okay, we're going to be the ones that deliver the message. Often you're not the best one to deliver the message. Can you figure out who that is? Right. And like identifying those right, sort of nodes. I'm going to change topic just a little bit. I'm going to agree with something you said before, because I am a big believer in this, but then I'm going to kind of pose a challenge or a question.
Sure.
This idea of like ignoring the 95% of people who aren't ready to buy right now. I often think about there's a verse in the Bible that's like, be kind to everyone, because you never know when you might be entertaining angels, right? The equivalent of that is like, you never know when you might be entertaining customers, right? Like somebody, if you got something for them, if there's a conversation for them to participate in, a movement, something that is creating value for them, even if they're not ready to buy. Maybe they get a new job in a year and now they're like, hey, I've been a fan all this time. I'm at a new company that has budget. Totally. Let's go. Right. That world is very real. And so this kind of combination of like having this own media where you can kind of carry out these conversations, doing it in a nearbound way, you're bringing in the voices that surround everybody. I can plot out, and I've actually done this in like a crazy guy sort of way. I can plot out the causal chain of like what happens on that buyer journey. But here's what I can't predict is how long it's going to take. And so here's my challenge to you, because you could say, hey, I'm cultivating future customers, but if they're not going to be a customer for 5 years and you've got 18 months runway, how do you combine the knowledge that this is how it works and building movements, building conversations, communities around the problems that your product solves? This is the way to win long-term, but what's the time frame and how do you like look for those time bounded? Okay, we need results in 6 months or 18 months. How do you use this approach in a way that can kind of get you enough in the near term to allow you to invest in the long term? And maybe there's not an answer, but I'm just curious how you think about that problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think about it a couple of ways. One is, I think when people often think owned media, their mind goes to organic. And organic typically goes to organic search. And for sure, if you're creating content for search, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. You've got to write SEO kind of perfected articles. Google has to rank them, and then you have to wait for the qualified traffic, blah, 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 blah. So I think we need to define owned media differently than sort of a strategy where you're waiting for a third party to approve or deny effectively your content asset as a gating function to driving the right traffic to your site. That takes a while. And by the way, in many cases, it's valid and important work. I do think there are some cases where, so I'd answer the question two ways. One, where owned media has a faster feedback loop than you might imagine. We're doing an event tomorrow all around how to justify an investment in owned media for your planning process in 2024. We have people signing up that have never subscribed to Audience Plus, but they're subscribing, they're downloading an ebook, they're kind of engaging. And it would not surprise me if we got an email from one of them. They're saying, hey, we have a conversation going on around this. The tools you've given us, you've shared are helpful or we're thought-provoking. I'd love to see a demo so I can be armed into that conversation. Now, if you plot out the buyer journey, it would look very weird. They're not even on our map, right? Or they just register for an event and then they send the email. But there's like a human component to that, a human dynamic that I think is nearly impossible to codify at scale. So the first thing I'd say is I don't think owned media takes that long. It could in some instances, and I think the quote from scripture was important, because what I have found at Gainsight is when people sign up to these things, typically they sign up with their personal email, which as a digital marketer for me originally was like, no, like you have to use your business email. But what that signaled is they want to maintain a relationship because they're switching jobs, or they might switch jobs, and they might go from a position where they loved the content and they got value from it and they weren't yet ready to buy because they weren't empowered or they didn't have the budget or the voice at that company to do so. that they've brought us into the next company. So I very much think there is sort of a flywheel effect of sorts. And so the other element maybe is that it compounds. And so you start with the folks, monetizing the folks that are in market today, as you're creating more content, hosting more events, kind of creating more kind of resources. And then people are inviting their friends, they're sharing the links, it's growing. And over time, at least from my experience at Gainsight, it catches up. And then you sort of meet the market at a moment where there's now more maturity in the category. People know about the technology, it's in the budget for the following year, and you're sort of able to catch the wave that you've been, or surf the wave that you've been creating for the last several kind of months, quarters, years. So I do think this stuff compounds over time, but in the earliest days, for sure, there's going to be some folks that hand raise and kind of it moves faster, and others are going to be following and watching for a long time. But chances are when they buy, it's going to be a fast deal cycle. You know, they're going to renew when the time comes, they're going to utilize the product, and they'll probably advocate.
The thing that I would hop onto that with, Isaac, is I think what you presented was a viewpoint that was like this linear x-axis that's kind of like, it's kind of qualitative or ordinal, right? So it's like, hey, we can't really define 0 to 100, but there's this x-axis. And I think the reality is that things are much more messy. It's much more like an x and a y axis. And then there's also a z dimension. So it's a graph. So you could plot this however you wanted, but the y could be, let's say, the quality of the people, right? So for example, you have this x-axis. If you have a media and company and you have a media strategy, so the quality of the people that are speaking to that media, right mouths or the right thought leaders who've done the thing before, right? And then I think the z-axis is also the quality of the advice or the relevancy of that as well. So like those things, if you want to drive more results sooner, then you just niche that down, right? Or you widen that out. So I mean, we've certainly experienced this ourselves whenever, we do something like, I don't know, like the Nearbound sales blueprint, right? So like that's a pillar piece of content that we produced. It's very tactical. And then the people we got excited about it and talking to, like those were very specific voices to that. And then the quality was also very high. And like, those are the things that we saw drive the most, I would say, let's say pipeline and conversations with the media strategy. And it's something that we talked about. So I think it's, X, Y, Z would be how my brain thinks about it in terms of
Jared, as you were chatting,
impact.
I'm reminded of, this is what I love about this owned media play. There's this amazing two-way component to it. So it's easy to think like, okay, owned media. So what I'm doing is creating these conversations, which builds an audience, and that audience will eventually convert into customers. But when you're thinking Nearbound, you're also thinking of bringing in other voices. You have the benefit to the sort of audience or consumer of that content. You also have the benefit to the creator if you're bringing in other creators. And so like some of the quickest wins as you're building an audience, which is more of a long-term influence play, some of the quickest ones are like, hey, we're going to do this video series. Who we bring in to do it with us, the fact that you brought them in to create something with you or bring them into an event, that has near-term influence on that partner or that account. If they're a customer or if they're a prospect, you have the ability to influence them by making them part of the creative side of the owned media play. And like, I mean, Jared, we saw this, we spun up Partner Hacker and it did not take long. Like the plays did not take that long. So, some of them do. Building the audience and building a big movement and a big conversation does, and that compounds. But there are some of those near-term things that I think people often don't think about. If you have, I mean, it's simple as this. If you have a podcast, you can invite people who would not give you an hour to jump on a call with them. They will come on and give you an hour to interview with them. And now you have a relationship. And that's because they're the guest. It may take you forever to build an audience, but what you can do with the guest, right? Really interesting.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Agreed.
Sorry, Jared. I thought you were motioning to jump in on something.
Oh no, I could hop in here. What I'd love to do is kind of transitioning is to kind of get tactical here. Our shared kind of audience right now, I'd say is, folks that are thinking about this from the perspective of, hey, I need to figure out marketing, own media, but then also this wider remit of like, partnerships over here or community, ecosystems, Nearbound. There's all these words being thrown out. What are some like table stakes things that companies can go do right now I might throw out one that's just like top of mind, Anthony, and would love for you to kind of riff on it from your point of view. One of the simplest ones for me is like, why aren't we marketing with our customers more? So like a customer referral program, for instance, that somehow got destroyed and turned into this affiliate link clicky kind of world where we're trying to track stuff like that. And that's just not the same thing.
Right.
So if we're using like a customer referral program, I would think of it like maybe how Pete Caputa treated it with Databox. And I mean, Isaac, they did what? They had like 1,000+ agencies contribute to their content last year. You know, like they're thinking about it very differently and not just treating them as like a case study, right? Like that's a terrible way to market with your customers. Send me a case study. It's like asking me someone to throw something away in the hallway, like a flyer. Here, can you throw this away for me? Hey, can you delete this email for me? Like, how do you think about leveraging the base that you already have, like customer marketing? That seems to me like, why wouldn't you market with them? Not at them, not use them, but market with them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there is a, exchange of value there, right, in the relationship where, and I'm speaking as an early stage company where our early customers are our most important, assets in a way, and not to think of them in such a dehumanizing way, but nothing is more important when you're starting a company, and I'll argue at scale, than your customer kind of relationships. The cool thing about doing so is, especially when you're doing something new and interesting and thought-provoking, is it's not just you as the brand that's getting the case study, but instead of it being a PDF or whatever, it's now this video thing. They get a chance to share their story as an early adopter of a trend that positions them as a thought leader in that space. And so I saw this all over Gainsight, where customer success was very new. And so rather than us as a very small kind of motley crew producing all the content, we had our customers produce content on our blog, and our blog became kind of the destination for the industry and not just a performance surface for our SaaS business. So I think what's really cool about that, now imagine blowing that up to like episodic video series, live events, podcasts, whatever. You can kind of like run a different sort of format, kind of analysis of what would work. But in addition to the value that they're getting from the affiliation with you as sort of a disruptive new brand that's going to kind of align their story with the broader movement, you get the validation, and you get probably a much more engaging way to get the validation than the kind of traditional case study. I'll give us one last example of this, because I think this might be interesting to you all. What we realized at Gainsight down the path was we started building within our marketing automation stack, an understanding of almost like a heat map geographically of where our audience was. And so imagine, Atlanta, we knew we had 500 customer success professionals opted into our audience as subscribers, or whatever language we want to use, in that region. So what we came up with a program called Pulse Local, where we sent an email to all 500, and we asked them if anyone would be interested in being a chapter president for a local community that was sort of a subset of our broader kind of thought leadership brand called Pulse. And so what we found is we had a number of people raise their hands and say, hey, I want to affiliate with you as the market leader and be a local champion in my community around this broader movement or this category, or however you want to refer to it. And that's just another signal that it's not just one way. We certainly like appreciate having someone who is on the ground kind of as a community organizer, event kind of organizer, subject matter expert, but it worked both ways because they felt like they were a part of something. They felt agency. They felt like, part of an exclusive group that had been affiliated with a market leader kind of driving change in the industry. So I very much believe that to be true. And I think for a lot of companies, they're like, where do we start with our content? This might be an obvious place to actually start.
I love that. And then you have all those, nodes all over the place that allow your, the story finding function, to shout out Logan Lyles, right? It's not just about storytelling, but like, where do you find all these stories? You've got all these different nodes that you're connected with that are in all these different places that are themselves connecting to other people, and you're able to kind of source more. Okay. So I have a bit of a challenge for you. I think about this myself, but I mostly hear this a lot from people who will kind of push back on this owned media concept. So you need to live in market and be where your customers are. And if your customers are on LinkedIn or YouTube or podcasts, platforms, whatever, why fight it? Why not just do all your content there? Why are you trying to get them to come to like your website and be your subscriber so you can own them? You know, like how do you respond to that challenge? Because there's a nugget in it that I think is right, but I also think there's some potential risks, and I'd love to hear how you think about that, because it's a, like that's what you're pushing up against, I'm guessing, mostly when you're talking to marketers about this.
Yeah, but I think it's also a misconception. Like I think owned media requires rented media distribution. Like you can't do owned media. It's not if you build it, they will come. You have to be where your audience is. You have to have an active presence in those channels. And I'll talk about some ideas how. But for too long in B2B, we did rented only without owned. And that didn't work. Like, again, as a marketing leader from these companies, we'd spend like 30 grand on a video, put it on YouTube. And my CEO would ask me how it went. I'd be like, I think it went okay. We got like 200 likes, 200 views. Like, I think we might've seen an organic bump in traffic that day. Or do this podcast and put it exclusively on Spotify. And as you guys know, the podcast is a long game. It's a marathon, but we would get like halfway through a season with like 47 listens on an episode. He'd be like, you should probably stop doing this because it's not working. And so in the consumer context, when you're able to like optimize for quote unquote virality and you get 10,000, 100,000 views, listens, whatever, like go for it. Like, you know, rented works really, really well. I think what we've learned is in B2B, rented only will not get funded next year. We're not going to have like the next 30K video get funded in an economic climate like we're living in today. And so in general, where sort of the first call for every company becoming a media company over the last, you know, I think it's like a 10-year-old kind of rally call. The reason it didn't work is we did not have any data to prove the impact of those content assets on revenue. We had listens, we had views, and we had stories that we could tell around potentially connecting it. But my belief is that this data set is the first party data around your audience is fundamentally the currency for how we kind of make sense of all of this content moving forward. Now, so a quick note on the rented thing. You have to give away enough value for free where your audience is so they can come to understand like what can I expect by following these folks, right? What type of content are they producing? What's the quality of conversations being had as I follow them? And I think what we've seen work really well is using like short form video clips or other things that are native to those platforms in order to start generating that engagement. But the art of sort of getting people to your site is less about, you know, again, just like a house for all your content. But what we've seen from the consumer context with Substack, Patreon, and others is this idea of exclusive content that we're producing that goes beyond just what you can get from LinkedIn or see on YouTube or others. And that's only for members. That's only for subscribers. We've seen it all over the consumer world. I think it's starting to make its way into the B2B space. And so that, just a quick example, that's where you can have a podcast on Spotify, but you reserve an ad unit in the opening minutes that say, do you want to watch the full version of this podcast in video, including like never before seen footage of X? Head on over to nearbound.com and subscribe for that added kind of benefit. And so you're starting to actively deplatform listeners from Spotify or viewers from YouTube or LinkedIn followers into this owned kind of context where you can start building relationship, but then from the B2B perspective, understand how all of that engagement's actually translating to business value. So that's where I think the misconception is today. It's not that we can't post on LinkedIn or YouTube or others. It's actually the opposite. We have to, and it needs to be part of the more strategic work that we're doing in demand generation is figuring out how to play to those algorithms, get our content seen, and then deplatform that followership into a subscriber base.
I think one of the ways that I think about that, Anthony, is that when you have an owned media strategy, that means the content is the product. Mm-hmm. And this product is a consumption-driven product, right? It's not a access-driven product. And what that means is that you have to have things like predictability. So let's say series or experiences. And it has to have a feel, an objective, a point of view that has some like, hey, I come every X, Y, and Z time to get A, B, and C. And that experience in rented places is like a billboard when in fact, you're putting together some, other type of experience. So like LinkedIn or YouTube or Spotify or whatever, you're very limited by the format, right? Yeah. And by making it owned, you have that ability to influence. So like you can use those things all the time. I think the part that people miss so much of is they try to get their brand voice. They show up in those places where customers live, Isaac, kind of how you set this up. And they show up as a faceless vendor, and they try to convert them back to theirs versus going to those places and doing it with, the people that they already trust. Right. So like, if you have an owned media strategy in a series, you get the partners, right? The community members that are around you that are already in your group to, let's say, go out to that other watering hole, let's say LinkedIn, right? Or whatever, and have them take that message to pull people back over, not just you, right? Like, hey, it's cool over here too. And that's third party validation, right? And totally. I think that's where the collision of Nearbound and owned media is so powerful. It's that if it's not about your voice, it's about, who. And I think Isaac, that's the phenomena of like, Chris Walker, right? I'd love for you to talk.
It's funny too. Like, so I've gotten this wrong in both directions with previous companies. So I had a marketing strategy was basically entirely Facebook. And this was like early, like 2013, 2014. And it was like taking candy from a baby. It was incredible. And then Facebook, guess what? They realized there was a lot of value that they weren't capturing. They changed everything. Company pages were now treated differently than individual pages. And you had all these, you had to pay for stuff. Suddenly, what drove totally for free, we didn't do any paid. What drove pretty much our entire, pipeline and influence in the market went from almost like amazing to almost zero overnight. And so I got so irritated. I was like, from now on, all this amazing content, it's all on our site. So we had hundreds, thousands of articles. We had books, we had podcasts, video series, courses, like guides, tons and tons of stuff. Really hard to get people to come there though. It was like, if you build it, they won't come. And I think here's where the who economy component comes in. Because then I was like, okay, now we got to go back out to these other platforms to get people, but which platform? Right? Is it Facebook? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Twitter? Is it Quora? Is it Medium? There was different ones popping up at the time. And which platform I think is not the right place to start. You start with who influences my buyer. And if they are someone, like we had one person who was a podcaster, we got on their podcast and all of his people started to come to us through his podcast. We worked with a YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel sucked. We got nothing from YouTube, but we worked with another YouTuber. His entire audience was on YouTube. If we said, oh, we only do stuff on our platform, you got to come over to us, or we only do stuff on LinkedIn, we couldn't have reached his audience because they lived on YouTube. So we worked with him because he was on YouTube and his people were on YouTube. And then we have other people on Twitter. We had somebody on Quora who answered questions every day and would get millions of views. And so we partnered with them and worked with them. And so that's where I think it's like you use those platforms if the people you need to partner with are there and if their audiences are there. And you use them in ways that are kind of like unique to pull them to where you kind of have this, here's like the master place. Here's like the library, the templates, the higher value stuff, the members only stuff. But like, I don't know. I think that who question was what I was missing. I was thinking about what's convenient for us as marketers, not where our audience wanted to be.
Yeah. And what's cool is though, it's hard to answer the who question. Because,
and it changes all the time.
It changes and, new platforms come up and others like die out or whatever. A couple months ago, we might've thought Threads from Instagram was going to be like the new thing. And I don't know, I haven't logged it in a while. And what I think the benefit of owned media is like, we can have some insight into that, right? We can actually look at cohorts of our audience and say, from a distribution perspective, where are they coming from? And then what I love about the promise of Nearbound is who are the voices that are influencing them on those platforms and how can we work with them? And so that's where I see this being kind of an evolutionary shift, because today it's intuition, it's traffic that, we're trying to identify. It might be like consumer research. You might use a SparkToro or some of these emerging tools that can help with that as well. But we don't have the first party answer for our audience. And I think that's
making that connection. Cause like we all know, this dark social phenomena, like I know that this stuff is working and it's getting misattributed to search and whatever, But I can't tell you exactly what's working, exactly how much, because all the platforms keep
Yes.
all that stuff to themselves. It's a black box. And you don't want to cut yourself off from that, but you want to figure out how to bridge that connection. And that's where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
we've got our mothership, we've got our stuff where we can learn a lot about what people are reading, what they're staying longer on, which videos they're watching. But we've also partnered with somebody who's killing it on TikTok and somebody who's got a great podcast and somebody over here on this platform.
Yep.
And so you're kind of like partnering with the voices that live in market there and trying to kind of like connect it back to where that turns into that dark social, turns into your own actual first party data about consumption of your media content. You're getting me all hyped up, Anthony.
Yep. Well, look, the other way to think about this though is how we distribute in marketing, right? Like we need to be on those platforms because what I'm hearing you say is we're pulling people there from there to somewhere. And whether that's to our website, to whatever, in a world before, these platforms existed, we're pulling people from a point to us. And the question to ask is like, what about when we push people? Whether we have an email campaign where we're driving people to something or we're posting on LinkedIn. If I were to send an email where I'm sending traffic to YouTube from my audience, I get no inherent value from that. Now, if they discover us from YouTube from an organic perspective, or if we're paying to amplify that content from on YouTube, a lot of merit to being on that platform. But I've never heard anyone say, I sent traffic to YouTube and got value from it. Whereas if we send that traffic to an owned property, we can actually build that subscription relationship, or if they're already a member, we can understand kind of their consumption much differently. So I think that push context is kind of interesting too, because again, as just in my kind of, it may not be a universal truth, but in my experience, when we're hosting an event, let's say, most of the registrations are coming from email because we're pushing people to a landing page or we're pushing people to register. And so that's where I see owned media doing exceptionally well. It's where we send our traffic, not where we're pulling people from.
It's almost like what do you do with the trust that you've already earned, right? Maybe you earn that trust out there in the market on LinkedIn or something, but then what are you doing with that? Are you sending them all over the place or are you deepening it and being able to cultivate on another level? Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah.
And I think there's the thing that I see people screwing up right now. I'd love to hear what you say. Like, what are people screwing up right now whenever they hear this conversation? A partner person sends this to their marketer and goes, look, marketing with partners isn't this overly complicated old world channel thing. We just need to, market with the people that our customers trust. But what I see them screw up is they screw up the experience that they're creating. It's like, imagine you're used to watching X show, right? Consuming Y thing that has this actual media quality to it, a consumer level media experience. Yeah. And then what they create on the B2B side is like, did you forget everything about your consumption patterns in the shows that you watch, right? Yeah. The things that you check, like we forget all of those things. And then we listen to Tim Ferriss, we check that, daily email from, the Morning Brew or whatever. Yeah. And we throw all of that out the window. Yep. What are people screwing up that you see like the most? For me, I see that. I'm like, you might have a cool content, but like your media experience, I would never become a subscriber.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't know. I'm drawing back to my experience in partnerships. I was in BD for a little bit, and we used a lot. And so please call me out if I've gotten this wrong, but it's been some time. But like we think about things in terms of like, can we unlock MDF funds to go and do like a co-marketing campaign with another company? Get them to register leads on our behalf, and then we work it, and then we sell deals together. And then we close up our imaginary briefcase, leave the office, and we go home. We listen to Tim Ferriss on the drive home, or we watch carpool karaoke, and we're laughing, and like we totally check our humanity at the door when we go to work, and then we pick it up again on the way out. Right. So that resonates with me. I mean, I think that what people might hear this conversation and think about it through the lens of like, okay, this is for content marketers that are trying to monetize like an inbound marketing strategy into demand gen. But I very much think this is like the modernization of how we communicate as a company between companies and humans at the end of the day, brands and audiences, whatever language we want to use, and how we leverage our partners to tell stories. Ultimately, that's kind of, I think, what marketers do. They build relationship at scale. And finding ways to interject in a a way a human would want to engage with it is, I think, the lesson. So, I mean, people are screwing it up, I think, because we're leaning on the last generation of sort of, or just the cognitive reference we have on how to do this type of thing, because that's how we were trained, or that's how our organization did it. And I think there's like beauty in first principles right now, where we can say, okay, but if we redid it, if we thought less of like, the VAR channel selling insight, like whatever 1.0, and what would Mr. Beast do if he was a partner manager or something, right? How do we start like learning from some of those more modern voices? I think there's an appetite for it. I think there's an appetite for it up and down the org.
And the Clarion call is kind of fun, actually. So like the line that was kind of coming to me while you were talking, Anthony, is like, look, the answer to this isn't that complicated. You need to become a producer, right? You need to be a producer. There's a show, there's an experience that you're creating. And like, that's where we get to have fun. That's where we get to think like, hey, I'm going to try to create this little virtual event or whatever. And it could be lame. It could be about household appliances, right? Like there's nothing more lame than household appliances, right? Well, guess what's one of the most popular shows of all time? The Price is Right. People went to sit in that audience, right? That's lame, but the production was phenomenal. And I think that's the opportunity that we have with owned media, with Nearbound and B2B. The companies that are going to kill it, they're thinking about lame stuff, and they're making it freaking cool. They're producers. And then guess what? Your partners, they're going to want you to produce stuff with them and for them. And then your marketing team, kind of same thing. And that's the exciting part of B2B, the new frontier, where we could take, household appliances and become producers that produce, international hit television series, right?
Yeah. We have just a quick anecdote on as a plus one, or as a case study of that. We have a company that we're working with that produces, they're building the Google Maps for the subsurface, selling to utility engineers. And you might think, okay, what does that kind of traditional, very regulated industry look like from a marketing perspective? They're producing probably one of the more entertaining podcasts I've ever heard, all about utilities. They're building a creator program, and one of their assets for formats that works better than anything else for their audience are memes. So just another proof point of even like legacy industries, even, regulated or like old school kind of businesses, like at the end of the day, they're human beings at the other, on the other end of those campaigns. And so what an opportunity to break through.
It's funny that I just realized we've gone for 47 minutes. We didn't even get into, Nearbound.com is built on Audience Plus. I actually wrote an article that we both published about why this is such a fun, great marriage. And particularly even that you're an early stage company, what are the benefits of treating some of your vendors like partners and partnering together on things where you have a joint point of view? We didn't even get into, I was going to get into like what's happening with the sort of the public square of social media as it gets too noisy and toxic in many cases, and how people are reverting to like private communities, Substacks, all these trends. So much more we could get to. We're going to have to do this another time. Anthony.
Well, we can do it another time because we can do it where?
We can do it. What? What's at the Nearbound Summit?
Absolutely. We can do more conversations there. We got a ton of stuff that's happening off the backside of that, because we'll also be taking all of these combos and putting them on, nearbound.com. Right. And I think too, to tie this all back together, there's some amazing clips that we can use as a promo for Audience Plus, right? So there's the Nearbound thing coming back together. We're using own media, right? And then our voices as customers that we're going to push back out to you. We're going to produce it, Anthony. We're going to make it so dang good that you can't help but share it, right? So then that brings people our way, right? Thanks so much for your impact on the industry. We've certainly learned a lot from you over the years. Honored to have you here today. And look forward to the intersects between owned media and Nearbound.
Appreciate it. And you guys are blazing a trail, I think, for all of us. So thank you for all the work you're doing. And we're learning so much from you as well, from early in the Partner Hacker days, till now and in this next chapter.
All right, Nearbound. We'll see you around. Until next time at nearbound.com on the Nearbound Podcast.